Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my May wrap up. Okay, so for the month of May, I read a total of 9 books and they were all audiobooks and I had 1 DNF. Now, I usually have at least 3 DNFs, so the fact that I only had 1 was really a treat. Reading wise, I think I only had 1 5-star read. The rest were like okay, so it was, look, as long as I can have at least 1 5-star read, I consider that a good reading month because I average around 8 to 10 books a month. So if none of those were a 5-star, I would be in a slumpity slump. So I'm thankful I had at least 1 5-star. Okay, let's jump right into it. Book 1 that I started with was The River by Peter Heller. So this one I actually heard about from Teresa over on her channel, Sweet Tea Reads. She's kind of like a thriller horror reader, and this one was like a wilderness thriller is what it was themed as, but this is actually more of a survival story. We are following our main character Jack. We are in his POV the entire time. This is set in like the Canadian wilderness. So Jack and his best friend are on a canoe trip, and when there is suddenly a wildfire that is now making its way across the forest, and now they have to cut their trip short and make their way back. Now, on their way back, they're in the canoe on the river. They come across a couple who are arguing on the riverbank, but it's foggy, so they can't see them. They decide to warn the couple of the oncoming, approaching fire that is coming their way, but they want to wait out the argument. They don't want to jump into their business, so they camp out, and the next morning they see the man paddling down the river alone, and the woman is not with him. The woman is now missing, and then everything ensues from there. This is actually written more for like the love of the wilderness. Like I said, it was kind of themed, and I went into it thinking that it would be like a mystery thriller because it's set in the wilderness. But this is actually a survival story. It's not really a mystery because you kind of already know the whodunit, what's happening. It's kind of like revealed. There really isn't a big mystery behind it. The pacing of this was, I'm not gonna say it's uneven, it just didn't match the events that were happening 100%. Like in the beginning of this, the pacing matched. Like they're on their trip, they're camping, they're fishing, the pacing was like matching what was happening. It was kind of laid back and relaxed. They're like reminiscing because they were old college friends, I think, but they were like really, they're best friends. They're reminiscing on their life. And you know, they love all the same things, books, poetry, they're going back and forth. So the pacing of that was like relaxed and it matched. But then when all these other things start happening, there's like an oncoming fire that they know is coming their way, and then this missing woman and finding her, all these things, the survival situation they find themselves in. I kept forgetting the urgency of it because it just didn't match. The pacing didn't match. Like the fire came upon them all of a sudden, and I was like, oh, fire's here. Like it wasn't, I was like, I should be feeling the heat of this. I should be feeling like the thrill, like the excitement and anxiousness, and it didn't match. So I gave this 3.5 stars simply because of the pacing. The survival story itself was good and the writing was great. This was his debut, and especially being a debut, I thought he did great. Especially he's a wilderness guy, you know, like, so of course his books are all going to be wilderness based, so that really shone through. All of the writing about the wilderness and the outside, that shines through, and you can tell that he loves it. I gave it 3.5 stars for that alone, and I don't read a lot of wilderness setting mysteries and things like that, so that's why I gave it 3.5 stars. The pacing is what kept me from giving it a higher rating. Okay, book number 2 that I got into right after that was The Guide by Peter Heller. This is actually a companion novel to The River. I'm not going to say it's a duology. It is more companion. Now this one was more of a mystery thriller. Again, wilderness setting. We're following Jack. He now works at an elite fishing lodge set in Colorado on a river known as the Billionaire's Mile that is also gated. It's gated, okay, so it's like kind of a locked in thing, and the surrounding woods, the surrounding area, there are signs that says don't get shot, and wealthy rich people also live in the surrounding areas as well. I mean, the whole place is geared towards wealthy clients. That's why it's called an elite lodge. So wealthy clients gain respite from the viruses that are plaguing the world. COVID is one of the viruses, the main virus that is mentioned in this when viruses do come up. But that's basically the premise of this story, or the premise of this place. This place is an elite fishing lodge geared towards wealthy clients, celebrities, rich people. They go there supposedly to relax and just get away from the world because you have, you know, clean mountain air, clean water, fishing, like there's nothing toxic in this environment. So this is like a place to escape for the wealthy. And Jack is the fishing guide for this place, and his job is basically he gets assigned to a client. He gets assigned to a wealthy client, and his job is to take them out to the best fishing spots. I think trout is the main thing they're fishing for in this. So he takes them out to the best spots every day. Basically, the job leads him to find more sinister goings-on. That the goings-ons, the what's happenings that are happening behind the scenes of this supposed lodge, okay, which is where this mystery thriller aspect comes into play. I gave this 3.5 stars as well because I didn't really like the execution, I will say, of the mystery element to this. I thought that this was written really well in terms of, again, the wilderness setting. You learn things about fishing and different things. I mean, I learned a couple things I didn't know. So I'm gonna say if you are a wilderness and outdoors person, the atmosphere of that and the setting is going to pull you in, and I think you will really enjoy it. Again, the mystery aspect of this I thought could have been executed better. I thought some of the things that happened at the end were kind of unbelievable. Like, I felt like it could have been executed in a way to make me believe that the ending would have been more possible. Yeah, so 3.5 stars for this. I still am going to read another Peter Heller book because this was a companion to The River where we're following the same character. I kind of want to go into another one of Peter Heller's stories based out in the wilderness, following new characters, new people, a whole new storyline. So I am going to be continuing on with another one of his wilderness stories. Okay, the next one was A River Enchanted by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is an adult fantasy drenched with Scottish folklore. And I had never read anything that had Scottish folklore that I can recall. So this one we are following, again, our main character's name is Jack. He is from the Isle of Cadence, where he gained his bard ability. He shipped off to the mainland university to study music. He's summoned back to the Isle of Cadence to help the people solve the mystery of sudden young girls' disappearances that the people believe the spirits that rule the isle are behind, and these spirits will answer to a bard's music alone. The pacing of this was so slow. Can I say it again? Slow. Okay, it was so diggity dang slow. It was dragging on and on and on. It's like, God, 1,000 years later, and it's like you're still just being dragged on. Oh my God, it was excruciatingly slow. I had to stop. I took breaks reading this. I got partway through it. I went into another story, finished another book, came back to this, took another break, went and finished another story, and then finished this. So I finished 2 books like in the process of trying to finish this one book, okay? I loved the premise of it. Isle of Cadence and the Scottish folklore surrounding this island, and Jack, our main character, having a bard ability, a music ability, and with his music ability it actually causes a sickness, an illness the more he uses it, I think. And these spirits supposedly only answer to a bard's song. We have enchanted items as well, like the weavers, like they have a certain magic, weavers magic, where they can enchant items with a magical ability, which comes in handy. So those things were fantastic. I loved that. I loved that. But the plot just dragged on forever. It just took forever. I can't say it enough. It took forever, people. Yeah. And that's all I have to say about that. I love atmosphere, okay? I love atmosphere. And atmospheric reads are supposed to be slower paced. You can't really have an atmospheric read and be 100% action and plot driven, because it just takes away from the whole point of the environment if that's the premise of the story. Like if it's as if like the world and the environment itself is a character on its own, and that's the whole point of having a more slower paced atmospheric story. But this was excruciatingly slow, and I still didn't feel the atmosphere, you know what I mean? So those two didn't go together in this story. So what I'm going to tell you is, if you're intrigued by this and you want to give it a shot, I would say do not listen to the audio, read the book. I have found that sometimes reading the physical book with slower reads like this are better. I'm just such a big audiobook reader because I can just get through audio quick. If I can get a book on audio, I will do that. I don't just go to a physical book right off the bat anymore. I have realized that sometimes dealing with the more slower paced, and I'm not gonna say written by a British author, but if it has that kind of British humor, British style of writing, I have found to be slower. The British style of writing, or a European way style of writing, I hope I'm like saying that right, or you're understanding what I'm saying. It's written differently. They write things differently. It's kind of like the same thing with British shows. They're longer. I don't know if anyone recognizes that or knows what I'm talking about, but it's different. Things are longer. The pacing is different. Everything is just done differently. So for me personally, I've realized that if I'm going to read a story that has that kind of European setting, or has like a European author or a European like British style of writing, I am just gonna go right to reading the physical copy. Like I'll try the audio and kind of get a feel if it will work, but typically when it comes to that, for me, I'm gonna have to read the physical copy. My brain, my mind, it'll just work out better for me that way. So I did give this 3 stars. It's based on obviously the setting and the premise. I couldn't go higher than that because the pacing just, for the audio. Now this could have been, like I said, it could have been a different read if I would have read the physical book, but the audio for this, the pacing, no, couldn't go higher than 3 stars. All right, next up was The Secret History by Donna Tartt. Y'all, all right, I'm gonna get into it a little bit with this one, okay? So I don't know if this is considered a classic. I would say this is like a more classic dark academia. I liked it, but I didn't. Let me tell you why. The pacing of this was extremely slow. Again, extremely slow. This could have been condensed down a lot. That was the difference. Like sometimes things are just slow, yet they shouldn't be condensed down. Like it just needs to be executed or written in a different way. This was kind of written like a classic. That's why I'm calling it a classic. I'm not going to even call it a classic dark academia, which it is. I'm going to consider it a classic book in general because it's written like one. I do not like classics. I don't. I only like one classic, and that's The Count of Monte Cristo. The Count of Monte Cristo is one of my favorite books of all time, one of my favorite movies of all time, and that is a classic. I typically don't like or read classics because of the writing style. They drag on, they can be condensed down tremendously, and they reiterate. Like the writing it's like a lot of reiteration, things that, like you're saying things that don't even need to be said. You can just cut that out of the story. They're not relevant. You know, we don't need to know that. And it's, you know what I mean? You know. And the writing style is very telly, not showy. I can't stand a telly, not showy type of writing style. No, it's like excruciating to read or listen to, because the brain, it's like you're not even allowing me to see what's happening because you're too busy telling me. Like their writing is an art, and they like learning and knowing how to write in a way that gets the imagination and your psyche to see it while you're writing it in a way that's showing me and allowing my brain, my mind to see it instead of just telling me what's happening. That's a skill, that's an art form that a lot of people don't like realize until you start reading different books and different styles, writing styles, different genres, different time frames of when books were written. That is when you'll start picking up on all these little like nuances and realizing differences in writing, because this was written and published in 1992. Things are written differently now. There is one character in this in particular that was very hard to put up with. He's a part of the small group of friends that we're following, and in my mind I was just like, no one would put up with him the way that they're putting up with him in this book. They're just allowing him to talk the way he's talking, get away with the things he gets away with. There's like no consequence or repercussions for him. I just couldn't see him being a part of this friend group, really. I couldn't see that at all. No, and it was very hard to suspend my belief. If you read this, you know exactly who I'm talking about. And yeah, that was a problem for me. Okay, they were allowing him and putting up with him and like before certain events took place, and that wasn't really like touched upon. Like nothing was explained as to why that was, because I like things clarified and clear. And especially if that's never going to be cleared up or clarified ever in the story at any point, it just leaves me confused and unable to suspend my belief. And I'm in a place of that, well, none of that made sense. Like what? I'm in this like what place? I didn't like that. Let me just read you the premise of the story. I know a lot of people already know what the secret history is, or they've heard of the secret history, but in case you've heard of it and you don't know the premise, let me just give you the gist of what this is about. Under the influence of their charismatic classics professor, a group of clever, eccentric misfits at an elite New England college discover a way of thinking and living that is a world away from the humdrum existence of their contemporaries. But when they go beyond the boundaries of normal morality, they slip gradually from obsession to corruption and betrayal, and at last into evil. I gave it a 2.5 star. It's like 2 to 2.5 stars for me. Next up was The Girls in the Garden by Lisa Jewell. Now, this was my first Lisa Jewell book, my introduction to her, and I know couple people that like Lisa Joel, so I wanted to jump in and give her a shot. The premise for this is you live on a picturesque communal garden square, an oasis in urban London where your children run free in and out of other people's houses. You've known your neighbors for years and you trust them implicitly. You think your children are safe, but are they really? Midsummer night, a 13-year-old girl is found unconscious in a dark corner of the garden square. What really happened to her and who is responsible? I read that premise and I wanted this to be my first Lisa Joel book because the premise reminded me of Rear View Window. I think I've mentioned this before in one of my other videos. If anything has like Alfred Hitchcock Rear Window vibes, I'm going to be interested in that, like right off the bat immediately. The setting is, again, it's called a communal garden. So imagine never having any privacy because imagine just like all your neighbors are like this, like front and back, and like in the center you have this like communal beautiful garden area that everyone kind of tends to, because everyone is like facing this inner garden in the center and everyone's running in and out of each other's flats like the kids, the neighbors. You're just, you know, you can't really get a moment to yourself without having to talk to a neighbor like, because again, it's that Rear Window setup, but just with a communal garden like being the main focal point of the story and your life if you lived in this place. Very interesting. My imagination had like a field day trying to like picture this, you know, way of living. The setting was just, I loved it. I loved the setting, and that really gave it the 4-star rating that I gave it, was the setting alone. The writing was good and the characters were developed in this, but the mystery and the ending of this was disappointing to me. And me and my best friend did a buddy read of this together, and she has read Lisa Joel and she likes Lisa Joel, but she was disappointed in this one for the ending. It just really wasn't thrilling. Nothing of like excitement or thrill really. It was literally just the setting made the story in this. So 4 stars for the setting alone. The mystery was kind of meh. But again, considering this was my first Lisa Joel book, I didn't want to read one that everyone kind of guarantees me is going to be 5 stars and then read this and be like, and compare it. So I wanted to start with one that I kind of knew was going to be more, but have a setting that I knew I was going to give a high star rating to for the setting alone. So 4 stars for the setting. The mystery element was okay. All right, next up, I read The Magician's Daughter by H.G. Perry. This is a magical realism, historical fantasy. Yeah, that's what this is. We're following our main character, Biddy. She was orphaned as a baby. She grew up on this legendary island off the coast of Ireland, hidden by magic with her magician guardian, Rowan. I had never read anything set in Ireland before. This is where I kind of realized again, like when I mentioned earlier, I should have read the physical copy of this because this dragged on for me. Again, it's that like a British writing style. It just, I needed to read this physically. But listening to the audiobook of this, it just dragged on. It dragged on. It just dragged on. It dragged on. So I gave this 2.5 stars because the premise was fantastic, and this had the Scottish musical Brigadoon. I don't know if anyone has ever seen that or heard of that, but there is a Scottish musical called Brigadoon. It's like this magical Scottish island that is invisible by magic, and I think every 100 years it becomes visible for a day, and our 2 main characters come across it and they're in Brigadoon for a day, and I have to make the decision if you're gonna stay, if you're gonna go. You know, the story of Brigadoon is kind of laced in this. because this island, it appears every so often just like Brigadoon does. So that attracted me because it had Brigadoon vibes. I gave this 2.5 stars. That's it. Next up was Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. All right, y'all. This is gonna be the rant of the video. This is the rant. Now, I'm not gonna do a full-on rant because, you know, I'd be here all week. I'm gonna do a half mini rant. Is that okay? Half mini rant? Let's do it. Enter the brutal and elite world of a war college for dragon riders. That alone will just pull you in, okay? It pulled me in. I was intrigued. Give me a little more. 20-year-old Violet was supposed to enter the scribe quadrant, living a quiet life among books and history. Now the commanding general, also known as her mother, has ordered Violet to join the hundreds of candidates striving to become the elite dragon riders. But basically, she also has a kind of a disability, so there is a chronic illness representation in this with our main character Violet. I don't know what the medical term or name for her condition is, but her bones are brittle. I had it in the back of my mind. I've known about it. I just can't remember what it's called at the moment. The premise alone pulled me in. Now, I jumped on this hype train. I think everyone knows that Fourth Wing is hyped right now. Now, I usually do not jump on the hype train. I usually wait until the hype dives down before I will even pay attention to it. But the setting of this book alone pulled me in, and the fact that our main character has a chronic illness. I have a chronic illness. I don't read a lot of books that have that relatability. Just to have a main character who has to have the fight of what their purpose is, but then have to fight every day because of what their body is doing, that their body isn't functioning properly, whatever the illness is. I just don't read enough of a main character having a chronic illness and having to battle and fight from all sides. So let me just get into this rant. This was considered a new adult fantasy story. It's actually considered romantasy, okay? Now, I did not know that. I am going to tell you all the things that I did not know previously before reading this, because I want you, if you haven't picked this up yet and you want to, I want you to go into this with the right expectations, because I did not expect what I got. This was it was like a clashing of genres, almost. Not genres as if, is it a fantasy, is it this, is it this? It's deemed new adult, but it's actually feels, and yeah, it feels like YA in terms of writing style and how the characters converse with each other and like their thought processes. That is YA 100%. The language in this would be considered adult. There's like profanity all over the place in this, because we're dealing with 20-year-olds in a military college. Just throw in some dragons. It's 100% accurate for how 20-year-olds would act, think, and speak, set in a military college with dragons thrown in. I give it that. That was correct. The first half of this book, if you imagine a roller coaster, if you're waiting in line to pick your seat on a roller coaster, fantasy was not in the front seat of the roller coaster. Fantasy was a middle seat. The fantasy elements was definitely a middle seat of this roller coaster, and this romance was in the front seat. And I'm just gonna tell you right now, it's not romance. It's lust, okay? Lust and romance are not the same things. That is the front seat of this roller coaster. I did not know that going into this. And I'm gonna tell you right now, like the only thing I knew was from someone, I read one of their reviews on Goodreads where it said that there was some spicy bits in this, but you could easily fast forward and skip them, and you could see them before they happened. Like, it's not hard to tell when that part is coming. You can just skip right over it, and there's not a lot of that. So I was like, okay, now spiciness means smut. That's what it means. And my experience with new adult, I don't have a ton. I've only read a few new adult books, but when I go into reading new adult, I mean, I expect language. And if there's gonna be a romance, then, you know, I expect intimate scenes. But from my experience with new adult, they weren't spicy. They were not smutty. They were done in a tasteful way. Like, it's just like a step above fade to black, where, you know, YA is fade to black, and NA to me is like a step above fade to black, and then adult would be, yeah, you go on into full spiciness, smut level. Because this is new adult, I did not expect to get the smuttiness in this. And this is 20-year-old lust, okay? This was not, it's not worthy. It's not worthy. It's not swoon worthy. It's not heart palpitation or sweat worthy. It's 20-year-old lust, people. And it wasn't even done well. Like, it was cringy, and I rolled my eyes. I couldn't stop rolling my eyes. I'm like, oh my God, okay, just let's skip this. Cringe. Fast forward, eye roll. It was just like, I was fast forwarding and eye rolling past all this 20-year-old lust nonsense to get to the dragons. That is the only what did I rate this? Did I rate this 3.5 stars? I rated this. And the only reason I rated this 3.5 stars is because of the fantasy in this. The setting, the premise, the dragons, the action, the plot, that needed to be the front seat of the roller coaster, okay? Not this 20-year-old lust that all of a sudden is supposed to turn into love. No, honey, no. She kept it honest, at least in the story, and she knew, like, she was calling it lust and knew what it was, and then all of a sudden she wants to turn it into love when nothing took place to make that change. No, honey, it's still lust, and you're still very uncreative and unimaginative. And it's still awful. This needed to be YA, and fantasy needed to be 100% in the front seat. And if you're gonna have a romance, a relationship, actually make it a romance, okay? Keep the banter, keep the sarcasm, make it angsty, but do it in a tasteful, creative, cheeky, sarcastic way without the spiciness. I've read quite a number of stories where it was done so well, and this was not done well. I'm sorry, it wasn't. And I realized that a lot of the people giving it 5 stars and really hyping this up are young women. And that concerns me. And they also read romance. They're like spicy romance readers. So that gives me an idea of like what's in their head. And it concerns me because there's nothing in this that deserves 5 stars in terms of this relationship between our 2 main characters. No. It's not worthy. I can give you several stories that are done so much better in terms of what's considered to be romance. We need to make a list of comparisons, because I'm going to tell you right now, if you could just set out a list, this would be the bottom of the barrel, okay? Scraps. We need to raise the standards. There, I said it. The fantasy portion of this was the only good thing about this book. The attempt of spiciness ruined it. The spiciness should have been kept out of this. It should have been at a YA level because it was written that way, it sounded that way, and the fantasy should have been 100% the main focus of the story, the fantasy elements and the plot line, because the plot and the action and the dragons and the bonding, that was fantastic. I would have given this book 5 stars if that's what it was. All in all, I just want to give people the actual right expectations of what you're getting into if you decide to dive into this story. I did not know what I was actually getting into when I jumped into this, and I just want everyone else to know what I wish I would have known, because I would not have read this if I would have had the right expectations. So there's my little mini rant. I gave this 3.5 stars just for the fantasy portions of the story. Okay, we're almost done. I have 2 books left. Next up was Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. This was my 5-star read for the month. This is magical realism, Greek mythology. This has mythological monsters in it. It also has certain angel species in it, like seraphim are involved in this as well. We have our main character, Karu. She is an art student in Prague. Growing up, she has sketchbooks filled with mythical monsters that have raised her. She disappears on secret errands. She speaks many languages, not all human. Her hair grows out of her head like this turquoise blue. Like, who is she? What is she? What is her deal? That intrigued me. We're in her point of view. In the first one, we're also in the point of view of our other character, our angel / love interest character, Akiva. He's an angel who is meant to be her enemy, which is entering into the enemies to lovers. But this enemies to lovers isn't kind of like the typical trope in other stories where there's a lot of banter and then it kind of shifts. This was more being on 2 different sides, being 2 different species coming from these 2 different worlds of war. There is banter and humor in this. There is, when the story starts off, she's attending her art classes with her best friend Zuzana. I'm gonna talk about Zuzana in a minute. And there is banter between her and her ex-boyfriend. Now that is hilarious. How they speak about him as well is so funny. The banter is so funny when it comes to those 2. Now, Zuzana is one of my favorite characters of all time. She has made that list. She's hilarious. And how her and Karu converse actually remind me of how me and my best friend converse together, and just the kind of funny banter and humor. Just it's funny, it was relatable, and it was just hilarious. And Zuzana and me and my best friend did a buddy read of this together, and Zuzana became immediately our favorite of all time. It was very good. Zuzana is one of my favorite characters. Love her. Absolutely love her. I thought the pacing in this was even. It was really good with the events that were happening. The characters were well fleshed out. And we have hybrid creatures in this. The monsters are hybrid creatures, mythological beings. We have seraphim angels in this. It's like a mashup of those, combination of those things. So yeah, I gave this 5 stars. It was excellent. Lastly, book number 9 was book 2 in this series, Days of Blood and Starlight by Laini Taylor. Okay, the premise, because this is book 2, I can't go into detail because of spoilers, but basically there's love, betrayal, and war, angels and monsters, oh my, hope and redemption, okay? All of those buzzwords, all of those amazing things. It was just not. I'm not going to continue on with this series, unfortunately. Book 1 was a 5-star read. It was excellent. It was solid. Unfortunately, with book 2, it just went downhill. It just went downhill. I'm pretty sure I gave this 3 stars. And the only reason I gave it 3 stars, either 3 or 3.5, was because of Zuzana. Our favorite character made this story. If Zuzana was not in this story and we didn't go through her point of view, it would not have gotten the rating that I gave it. It wouldn't have. It would have just completely fallen flat, would have not been good at all. Susanna was the main event of this. The writing changed. It kind of dragged on in places that didn't need to drag on. It was completely focused on the war between the angels and the monsters. Just changed from book one, and I wanted it to be written more like book one, and it just wasn't. The writing completely changed. So unfortunately, this was like a 3-star read for me, 3 to 3.5. And book one was fantastic, but like book one would be shelf worthy. Like I think I'm gonna end up getting that to put on my shelves, but I'm not gonna continue on with the series. All right, y'all, that was my May wrap up. It was kind of hit and miss reading month for me. But like I said, if I have at least one 5-star read, then, you know, I have to be thankful and happy about that, because I think I'd end up in a serious slump with all the books that I do read in a month, and to not have any 5 stars would just be yeah, I think we all know what that feeling is. We know. If you like this video, give me that thumbs up, hit subscribe so you are notified every single time that I upload a new video. And as always, happy reading, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers.